I welcome you on behalf of the Presbyterian Church, U.S.A. I am Alvin Puryear, President of the Board of the Program Agency of that church. For over 150 years, our church has sent some of its members to live and work in Lebanon in a variety of ministries. We have sought to maintain personnel in Lebanon as an expression of our interest in the welfare of the diverse communities which comprise that nation. We are proud to have been represented in Lebanon since 1953 by the Reverend Benjamin Weir and his wife Carol. Their work within the ministries of the Synod of the National Church of Syria, Lebanon, has produced a commendable record. Their commitment to serve the people, all the people, has been demonstrated again and again. We rejoice today. It has been 500 days since Ben Weir was kidnapped on May 8, 1984. His release will not diminish the commitment of our church to seek appropriate ways to work with people of goodwill of all faiths toward the goal of peace with justice for all people of Lebanon and the Middle East. Neither will his release diminish our active concern for the other hostages. We will continue to be inspired by the faith and commitment of both Ben and Carol Weir. Before Ben starts, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the Reverend James Andrews at the far end of the table, the stated clerk of the General Assembly of our church. I am now pleased to be able to present to you the Reverend Benjamin Weir. He will first read a statement and then entertain questions. Carol Weir would then make a brief statement, and that will conclude this press conference. Ben?
I hardly need to say that I'm glad to be here. I want to express my gratitude to fellow Presbyterians who have made this news conference possible. Thanks to the hospitality of the National Presbyterian Church, people who have made available the sanctuary for this occasion. Special thanks go to the program agency of the Presbyterian Church, U.S.A. for sustained effort and concern for myself, my family, and other hostages during the past 16 and a half months. I'm especially grateful to Dr. Alvin Puryear, President of the Program Agency, and to the Reverend Fred Wilson, Associate General Secretary of the Program Agency, both of whom have given personally and generously of their time and energy, and to Dr. J. Oscar McLeod, the General Director, who has made available resources of the Program Agency in a meaningful and personal way. I am also thankful to representatives of the public media who are here today to provide coverage of this news event in the service of the American people. I truly hope that our combined efforts and prayers will contribute to the release of the remaining 6 American hostages, and that they may soon join their families and loved ones and colleagues. Not least, but first of all, I give credit and praise to our Heavenly Father for his tender, sustaining power throughout this ordeal, for my release, and for the hope that by his grace, freedom will come soon to those who are still captive. The purpose of this news conference is fourfold. First, to announce my release and to confirm that I have returned to the U.S.A. safe and sound. Second, to convey a message from my captors, which I delivered yesterday by telephone to President Reagan. Third, to focus continuing concern for the immediate release of the remaining 6 hostages. And fourth, to support and urge maximum creative action now by the U.S. government in behalf of the remaining hostages. I believe a new window of opportunity has been opened, at least a crack, and that the opportunity for negotiation should be seized while there is still a possibility. I fear that opportunity may not last long. Let me comment briefly on my release. Just before midnight last Saturday, September 14th, I was suddenly released by my captors. I made contact with the American Embassy, whose ambassador and officials promptly and efficiently arranged for me to be transported to the U.S.A. Late Monday evening, I arrived by U.S. government airplane landing near Norfolk, Virginia. Upon my arrival, I understood there was hope that one or more of the other hostages might be released very soon. And to protect that possibility, there should be no publicity whatever for a day or two. It was mutually agreed that I go into temporary seclusion with my family, either at a government base or at a place of my own choosing. I and my family chose the latter option and avoided contact with the public media. On Wednesday, it became apparent that no other hostage had been released, so it was mutually agreed that the time for a public announcement had arrived. Consequently, I proceeded to announce this news conference for today. I will be ready to answer questions as best I can, but some aspects of my captivity and release I will not discuss. This is because I do not want to put in jeopardy the safety and welfare of the remaining hostages. I do hope a process may be pursued leading to their release in the near future. The verbal message which I have received from my captors is the following. They have one demand, namely the release of 17 prisoners being held in Kuwait. They are ready to release the 6 hostages in exchange for the 17 prisoners. They are prepared to work out the details of the exchange, which can be done without publicity. They have released me as a sign of their good intentions. However, they are not willing to wait much longer. They believe the U.S. government has been unwilling up to this point to negotiate a settlement, even though they believe various options are possible. They ask the U.S. government to put pressure on the government of Kuwait to release their prisoners. They state that if there is not a positive response to their demand in the near future, they are prepared to kidnap other Americans, and that though they do not want to harm anyone, they will go so far as to proceed to execute their hostages if their demand is not met. I personally believe this appeal from my captors should be taken seriously. I am aware that U.S. government officials are concerned for the safety and welfare of the remaining 6 hostages. I urge that new efforts be made and that new and creative options be explored for negotiating their release.
We will now take questions. 2 things. We would ask that you wait to be recognized, and we would ask that before you ask your question, that you give your name and affiliation. Yes.
Kevin McCullough with Chronicle Broadcasting. Reverend Weir, you're in a unique position to comment on whether or not the United States government ought to deal with terrorists, as you suggest. Some have said that to deal with terrorists invites future terrorism and kidnappings like this. What do you think about that, and what do you think the United States ought to do now?
It appears to me that each case needs to be taken on its own merits and situation, and that there are probably various ways in which this matter can be settled. I personally doubt there is going to be release of hostages unless there is some attempt to try to negotiate in some way that will be effective. And therefore, I think it is absolutely necessary.
Young lady in green, please.
Jill Lawrence with the Associated Press. Could you tell us why you think your captors released you and whether the U.S. government had anything to do with your release?
I do not know why my captors released me. It came very suddenly, perhaps an hour or an hour and a half before I was actually released, that they said to me I would be released. I know nothing about that other than what I have read as their statement, and I have no idea what dynamics are involved.
In the booth.
WKBW-TV Buffalo, do you know anything about the whereabouts or the safety of the other 6?
I have from time to time met 4 of the other hostages, and in recent months been allowed to talk with them, even to worship with them on occasion, and they are all well.
And how recently?
I saw each of the 4, I'm speaking now of Terry Anderson, David Jacobson, Thomas Sutherland, and Father Lawrence Martinjenko. I saw them on the day of my release.
In the gray dress.
Could you describe the conditions of your captivity? You said you weren't tortured, but just essentially what did you do during the day? Did you know about the takeover of the TWA jetliner, that sort of thing?
I was completely isolated from information and did not know about the TWA hijacking at the time. I was not physically abused. In fact, on the whole, I was respected by my captors. And I learned from the other 4 hostages that they too were respected. The only way in which I was unable to have any information beginning in the period that started with the 2nd of July. Prior to that time, I'd been kept in complete isolation and solitary confinement. Beginning the 2nd of July, occasionally there was available a copy of an English newspaper, on one occasion or twice a magazine, and later opportunity even to listen to news broadcasts on the radio. But at that time, I didn't know anything about the TWA hostage.
Great post, please.
George Curry, Chicago Tribune. You said you spoke with President Reagan yesterday. What did you tell him, and what did he say to you in demand to the message you gave him?
I have told you already exactly what I said to him. He did not respond in any specific way to the message, but he said he was glad to know that I had returned safely and was offering prayer of thanks to God.
In the glasses and great brown coat.
I was in San Francisco Examiner. What made you think that the release of the other hostages were imminent? Did it have anything to do with your seeing a group of them on the day that you were released?
No, the only thought I had of their imminent release was during my time of return to the United States. I was told that there was hope by U.S. government officials that 1 or more might be released soon.
Young lady in the hand there.
Yes, Pam Olson, CNN. In your opening statement, you said that you believe that a new window of opportunity is now available. What do you believe precipitated this opportunity? And you also said, quote, it may not last long. What makes you believe that it won't last long? And also, if I may ask a follow-up, do you have any reason to believe why you in particular, why were you chosen?
My reason for thinking there is a crack in the window of opportunity is that was the statement of my captors at the time of my release. I had no other indication or inkling that that would be the case before they said that to me.
Was there a change in their behavior, perhaps in their treatment of you?
I was not aware of any change in their care of me or their behavior toward me. Was there something else?
No, I think that's the last question. Yes, sir.
William Ringel from the Gannett newspapers. Could you tell us where you were held and if you were held in one place constantly, and could you please characterize your captors?
No, I will not discuss that.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Weir, you said that you expressed, Steve Gasquet, Outlook Communication, you expressed sympathy for the Shiite Muslims. Do you still feel that way after 16 and a half months in captivity?
Yes, I do feel sympathy for the Shiite Muslim community, which is a large community, has people of many different opinions. After I returned and talked with my wife, I learned that, for example, just one example, that one of our friends in the Shiite community had herself gone out and talked to neighbors and friends and storekeepers, trying to locate me and hoping that in some way she might be of help. That community, like any community, has people of many different opinions. I do not believe that all of the Shiite community are of the same opinion, nor of the same intention as my captors.
Yes.
Reverend Weir, Magda Abu Fadl.
Give your name and affiliation, please. Name
Yes, Magda Abu Fadl, Middle East Affairs News Service. Sir, you said you feel that the remaining 6 hostages may be executed if some of these demands are not met. Why do you believe that to be the case now, considering that they've been spared so long?
Because my captors said so at the time I was being released.
Yes.
John Fogarty, San Francisco Chronicle. Do you think the Reagan administration needs to change its policy and enter into direct negotiations for the release of the people that your captors want released to get the other 6 hostages out, something that they have never been willing to do in direct negotiations with these groups?
I don't pretend to know what the present administration has been attempting to accomplish, nor how they have been going about it. But it does seem to me there has not been progress thus far, and this says to me it may be time to consider some new approaches.
Yes, sir.
Bill Duesenberg, National Public Radio. Is there anything you can say about the other 2 hostages that you did not see personally? Do you know that they are alive and well, or anything you can say about them?
You might want to identify who the 2 are.
I presume you're speaking of Peter Kilburn and William Buckley. I have not seen them nor been in contact with them. I do not know anything about them.
Yes, ma'am. Stand,
Leslie
please.
Phillips from U.S.A. Today. Reverend, you lived in Beirut for 32 years, I believe. How do you feel about returning?
How do I feel about returning? To me, it was a tender and a tender time of realizing that perhaps I was saying goodbye to Lebanon for the last time.
Yes.
Judy Leon, American Broadcast News. Reverend, do you plan to work actively for the release of the other hostages? And if so, what do you plan to do?
I do hope to work actively in their behalf. At this particular point, I don't know exactly what to do, but this is the first step of at least trying to bring this matter to the attention as widely as possible of the American public. And I hope that the issue can be kept before the public in the hopes that their cause will not be forgotten and that new efforts will be made.
Ms. Friedenberg, Scripps Howard newspapers. Did your captors tell you why so many Americans were taken captive, why the French were taken captive? Did they say it related to American policy?
The primary I was not offered any detailed explanation, but by putting together brief conversations from time to time, I understood that my captors, first of all, were taking extreme radical action, hoping to recover the 17 prisoners from Kuwait. But over and beyond that, they were quite insistent, and I believe their viewpoint was consistent, that they were very much opposed to the Israeli invasion of South Lebanon and to the continuing effect of continuing effects spilling out from the occupation of South Lebanon, and most especially were they angry and committed against U.S. policy in support of Israel, and that they aimed ultimately, in the long run, toward bringing about a greater system of justice to oppressed people in the Middle East and in Arab lands, and ultimately to establishing what they saw as a more just Islamic government.
Yes.
Ann Garrels from NBC News. Without jeopardizing the well-being of the other hostages, could you elaborate a little more on your captivity? Where you, not where you were, but the conditions, how many people were your captors, a little bit more on the treatment.
I was held in solitary confinement in a room by myself during the period of the first year, the first 12 months. I was moved from place to place and was in several different locations. I was provided adequate food daily, a simple Lebanese diet of food, which I am accustomed to and therefore was no great problem for me, though it was not really a very balanced diet. I learned that later on, I learned that the other 4 men also, like myself, would have wished to have had more vegetables and more fruit, but in season, when those things were available, they were provided from time to time. I was dealt with, on the whole, with respect, and was told repeatedly that because I was, in their view, a religious person, they were giving to me special respect. And the same was said to Father Lawrence Martinjenko. The main problem was boredom, and for considerable periods having very little to do or to think, and I found myself thrown back upon my own inner resources in a way I had not experienced before.
Yes, please.
Lee May, Los Angeles Times. In your statement, you mentioned that you were urging maximum creative action on the U.S. government. Could you be a little more specific? Tell us what kinds of action you're urging.
I'm like Rip Van Winkle. I don't know what's been going on during the last 16 and a half months, but I would like somehow to see effort toward trying to establish direct contact between the U.S. government and whoever the captors are, and trying to open up a channel of communication. My captors repeatedly said that there was no response from the U.S. regarding their demands, even though they were ready to try to consider various options to see what the possibilities might be.
Yes, sir.
Reverend Weir, Tom Ferraro with UPI. After those 16 months of captivity and the boredom that you described, how would you characterize your own mental and physical state now? Did you lose weight? Have you had a tough time unwinding after all that?
To my surprise and deep gratitude to God, I believe I am in top physical shape, and the physical examinations I have had since my release have confirmed that. You will know better whether I am in good mental health or not. I believe I am, and those who have examined me said so.
Yes, sir.
Barry, Daniel Shore of NPR. You've said that contact should be made, there should be negotiations, and that there is a small window of opportunity. I'd like to ask you, beyond that, whether you sympathize with the demands and grievances of your captors, and specifically, would you propose the release of the 17 who were sentenced in Kuwait for terrorism in order to obtain the release of the remaining hostages in Lebanon?
I think I heard most of it. I do not know details regarding the 17 prisoners held in Kuwait, nor do I know what really has been going on between the time of their being imprisoned or being arrested. I don't feel I have enough information to be able to comment very helpfully or with any enlightenment on that topic. But I do think that it is desirable to encourage the U.S. government to examine all options, whatever they may be, and to pursue them.
Personal sympathy with the grievances of the captors as they explained them to you. You suggested with regard to Israel, regard to oppression, and so on. You sounded as though you identified yourself with their general grievances. Do you?
I do not identify myself exactly with what they are asking, and nor with their point of view. But I do feel that there is need to re-examine U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, and specifically regarding matters relating to U.S. policy with respect to Israel and to the effect of that policy upon Lebanon and neighboring countries in the Middle East. I think there is great need to re-examine that policy and really to see where it is leading us.
A young lady in gray.
Susan Spencer from CBS. You've talked about this window of opportunity a couple of times. Did your captors indicate to you that there was any specific deadline for the U.S. to offer some new proposal or to begin some sort of negotiation, first of all? And secondly, do you know of any direct involvement or indirect involvement of either Syria or Iran in your release?
I do not know of any specific deadline. I was not told of any time deadline, nor do I have any idea who may have been involved in the negotiations, if there were negotiations.
Yes, sir.
Kastner, Independent Network News, Index Newsfeed. Can you tell us if you brought back any messages from the other people who are being held hostage and what they are?
No, but I do expect when this news conference is completed to meet with families privately without news media and to share whatever information I have with them regarding the 4 men that I have met.
The woman in the back with the black.
When you met with the other
I don't think we can hear you. We can't hear you.
When you met with the other hostages, was the situation that you were taken to them or them brought to you, and did you at any time meet with all 4 at the same time? Were you taken to the other hostages when you said you had meetings?
Would you speak a little more slowly?
When you met with the other hostages, was it a situation where you were taken to where they were, or were they brought to you, and did you meet at any time with all 4 at the same time?
I didn't hear the last part.
Were you taken to them, or were they brought to you?
Yes.
The answer is yes. Did you meet with all 4 at the same time? The answer is yes. You may want to explain that for the last 2 months you met.
During the past 2 months, and beginning July 2nd, there were occasional opportunities to meet with 1 or more of the hostages. Sometimes I was meeting where they were, sometimes they came to where I was.
Yes, sir.
And the Independent News. Reverend Weir, did your captors threaten any harm to the other hostages if you did not deliver this verbal message, this death threat, at a press conference when you returned home?
There was no threat that specific. My captors did say that I was expected to make this message known to the U.S. government, and they assumed, they did not ask me, but they assumed that as soon as I was exposed or back to the American public, I would be exposed to public media. And they assumed that I would communicate this message through the media to the general American public.
With the glasses.
Andy Guthrie, Voice of America. We'll be broadcasting this back to the Middle East in Arabic, and I wondered, since you're fluent, now that you're out from under the pressure, do you have any message for your captors that you'd like to briefly state in Arabic?
No, I do not have any message for my captors, and I'm certain they will know that I have delivered the message and that I'm seeking to do what I can for the release of the 6 hostages.
Yes, sir.
Albert Estiro, Presbyterian minister from Egypt. Did you get the impression from your captors that they would like to convey a message to your church as a clergyman, or it was only directed to the U.S. government?
No, there was no specific message to the church as such. In fact, I was told, and I now know it was completely untrue, that the Presbyterian Church and the Catholic Church were doing nothing.
Yes.
Ellen Warren, Night Ritter newspaper. Reverend, you mentioned a verbal message which your captors asked you to deliver. Was there any type of message in writing whatsoever? And if there was, have you conveyed it to the government?
There was no written message.
Yes, ma'am.
Kathy Sawyer, The Washington Post. Reverend Reverend Weir, you speak fluent Arabic. You have worked for many years to benefit the people of Lebanon, and yet they kidnapped you off the street in a fairly rough fashion. You say that your captors respected you. Did they indicate how they select their victims to be kidnapped, and do you see any pattern in that selection?
No, I have no idea. I believe that I was kidnapped only because they thought I was an American, and I don't think they even knew who I was at the time.
Blue suit.
Patrick McGrath, Metro Media News. Terrorists are often accused of using publicity to achieve their ends, manipulating the American media. Do you think that your release is part of that effort for them to use publicity for their ends?
I presume that I was released in order to have some impact on the American public through public media, yes.
Sir, Walter Friedenberg of Scripps Howard. Some American officials say that the problem is that there are several factions among the captors and for control, struggle for control. Did you get any impression like that?
I do not have any impression about struggle for control among the various groups. I just don't know. I was quite isolated from that whole question.
Yes. Yes, please. No, young lady in there.
Oh, thank you.
Rainbow Flower.
Excuse me, Vicki Barker with UPI Radio. Sir, Kuwait has refused to give up prisoners in the past when faced with similar demands. Do you think your captors will settle for anything less than the release of these 17 prisoners?
I do not know to what extent they would be willing to reduce their demands. They have insisted on this as one whole complete demand. I doubt that will be answered unless there is some kind of negotiating process that may reveal what the possible terms can be.
Yes.
Cindy DiBiase from WBBM in Washington. Reverend Weir, your family and the families of the other hostages have been critical of the Reagan administration, saying they have forgotten. Did you feel forgotten, and do you now think the Reagan administration did not do enough to secure your release?
Again, I do not know what the Reagan administration has been doing. I was quite isolated from information. I believed that my family and the Presbyterian Church and other concerned individuals and agencies, and I assumed that the United States government was concerned about my condition and that of other colleagues in captivity. But I did not know that was true until I was released.
Yes, sir.
Sir, what specifically, Gary Lane, CBN News, what specifically were your thoughts at the time of your kidnapping and then as your captivity dragged on?
The morning that Carol and I were walking on the sidewalk, and I was suddenly grabbed and forced into a car, was quite a shock. I knew, of course, there was a possibility of being kidnapped, myself or others, and yet I wasn't really mentally prepared for it. On the floor of the car, as I was forced down onto the floor and the car sped along, I said to myself, this is a new experience. And I said, I feel that I'm in the hands of God. I don't know how this will turn out nor where it will go, but I believe that I'm in the hands of God. And so I turned it over to him. I also had, as the time unfolded that day and subsequently, a sense of responsibility for myself, that I, just couldn't say, God, here I am, but I'd have to do what I could for myself. And therefore I determined to do my best to survive in that situation with holding the conviction, and I must say this conviction grew with me more and more, that ultimately God would, through human instrumentalities, bring about my release. And I thank God that he sustained me in that hope and trust.
Armando Guzman with U.S.A. News. Sir, in your estimation, how much real influence does the Syrian government, Hafez-Assad, has directly over your captors?
I didn't hear all of that.
Could you ask the question again, please?
How much influence does the government of President Hafez-Assad from Syria has over your captors?
Yes, I do not know. I only know that on one or two occasions my captors said they would not listen to anything Syria might have to say to them.
Yes, sir. In the back, the blue.
Dave Beck with Time Magazine. Were you always held in Lebanon, or were you moved to another country late in your captivity?
I do not know, but I assume I was held throughout my captivity in Lebanon, because I was not transported for any long period of time.
Idea was it for you not to tell certain details of your captivity? Was it yours, the churches, the State Department, your captors, or who?
The captors.
Did you not to tell certain details?
That is correct.
Did you outline what they told you not to tell?
You don't want to answer that.
That's all I can say.
Yes.
Annie Grower from the Orlando Sentinel. You said that you had a sense that you were saying goodbye to Lebanon for the last time. Are there circumstances under which you would return to Lebanon to do what you had been doing?
I would like to return to Lebanon, but I don't think the present circumstances are conducive to that, and I think the situation would have to change in some remarkable way so that I would neither myself be under great danger, nor would I be an embarrassment, and I think that's a primary consideration, an embarrassment to the National Evangelical Synod, to which I have been responsible.
Yes, sir.
Jerry Levins, Cable News Network. Since freed hostages are commonly accused of being the brainwashed victims of pressure propaganda, the so-called Stockholm Syndrome, can you tell us, sir, whether your attitudes toward the Shiites and the problems of the Middle East is the same now as before your captivity, or has your attitude been changed?
I am not aware that my attitude has changed in any remarkable way or in any radical way. I spent my first 5 years in Lebanon living in a rather solid conservative Shiite community, and I have friends from that time and in subsequent times. Therefore, I have had a sense of contact and some measure of understanding and certainly appreciation for many people in that community, and recognize that there are many different opinions and types of behavior within that community, as you will find in almost every community. But I do not believe that my attitudes have changed in any decided way. I deeply resent the injustice of having been kidnapped, as did the other men.
We'll have one.
That is, sir, welcome home.
I didn't hear that.
He said welcome home.
Oh, thank you.
One question from one last question from the woman in red, please.
June Cross with the McNeil-Era NewsHour. Sir, what was it about July 2nd that makes you think that was the time that you started meeting with the four? Was there some change in the attitude of your captors? Did they tell you, explain why you are now being given a little more freedom? And can you say in any way what the five of you talked about when you got together? And what is it, aside from the fact that your captors told you so, that makes you think that they would kill the hostages if the Kuwaiti 17 were not released?
I'll begin with the last. I based that only on what they said. Why it was July 2nd, I have no idea. I could not coordinate that with anything else. I often said to myself, it's just like Christmas came July 2nd. But unpredictably. I think I've answered the question. Well, initially, we, at least I and Father Jenko, and then later on others, asked for permission to worship together. And after a week or two, we were permitted first time to worship with blindfolds on. Maybe another week or 10 days later, again, to worship with blindfolds on and a guard present. But subsequently, there were opportunities when they would put us together in one room and lock the door and say we could take our blindfolds off and talk together. And on those occasions, we would read the Bible, we would pray together, we would celebrate Mass, we would talk about what was going on with us, whether in a group or whether two people together. Just sharing experience and getting a great deal of mutual support from each other.
Thank you, Ben. Carol Weir will now have a statement, and that will end the press conference.
The time
please.
has come, I think, for Thanksgiving. And I am first of all thankful to God that my husband is released. I don't think I can say too many times, or we can say too many times, how thankful we are to our church, the Presbyterian Church, for supporting us in every way. And let me again mention the names of the Reverend Fred Wilson, who has given great hunks of his time to be with us and assist us, and also to the Reverend Oscar McLeod and Dr. Alvin Purrier. I also would like to thank our children, who themselves have been suffering through this crisis, and yet they have stood by us in every way. Let me also thank the members of the Presbyterian Church and people of goodwill everywhere, not only in this country, but in Lebanon and around the world, who have prayed for us and supported us with their concern. These are Muslim friends, Christian friends, people we don't know at all. We really want to thank you for the yellow ribbons, and in every way you have tried to keep this hostage crisis alive so that it might be resolved. I'd like to say a word to the media. You are present here, and we're glad for that. I'm grateful for the opportunities you have given us in the past to express our concern. I would like to say to you, if you want to save the lives of these men, you have a special responsibility. And I'm asking each one of you to assume that responsibility, to keep the story of the 6 alive. Please don't let it get buried again. You must keep it alive. To that end, our churches have developed TV spots. They are 10-second, 20-second, 30-second. They're not very long, but they will put before the American people the fact that there are still 6 hostages whose lives are in extreme danger. I have a great deal of trust in the American people that they will press our government for the negotiations that are necessary for the release of these men. A lot rests on your shoulders. We are not media people. We don't always know how to get this before the people, but every network has a news spot every night. We would like to see something about the hostages, these TV spots or pictures of the men on TV every single night until these men are released. Please help us with this. I would like to say that my daughter Susan and Marge Carpenter will be willing to make arrangements with the media following this press conference. I urge that every place of worship in the nation have a Thanksgiving service this next Sunday for the release of my husband, and plead with you not to forget the other 6. Thank you.
Thank you.